At first you think Cruella is a devil, but after time has worn away the shock, you come to realize you've seen her kind of eyes watching you from underneath a rock. If I may first give credit where credit is due, without ever actually saying it, the movie absolutely played around with this idea. I literally had not seen one trailer for the movie before watching it, so in some ways I didn't have any expectations, and yet, obviously, we've all had a lot of expectations for this movie. The very premise of Cruella de Vil receiving a redemptive origin story is pretty laughable. I mean, really? The woman wants to make coats out of puppies. I don't need to know why. But I'll start everything off by saying I was pleasantly surprised. Overall, I enjoyed it. It has its flaws, but first I'll talk about what I liked. For a movie about fashion, they do a really good job with the aesthetic. There are some incredible shots. It's just visually pleasing. The black and white motif is all throughout the film, which actually plays in really heavily to the Maiden's method bit of it too, but we'll get to that. Also, the soundtrack is pretty sweet. I loved the acting. Emma Stone and Emma Thompson were both amazing as per usual, and I thought all of the side characters were interesting and engaging. The weakest part of the movie, though? The 100% forced insertion of the 101 Dalmatians elements. The creators of the movie clearly saw the problem. No one wants sympathy for this particular de Vil, so they wrote an original story and built off of it. That original story is actually pretty interesting, heavily follows the Maiden's method, and probably could have been, about 30 minutes shorter. The runtime for this movie is 2 hours and 17 minutes. An hour and 45 would have more than sufficed. And what elements would have been worth cutting? Oh, I don't know. Anita, Roger, the dogs. The problem with the story in the long run is this. Either you're telling a villain story or you're not. I'm not sure the writers know where she ended up. I'm not sure Cruella knew where she ended up. I and the audience certainly don't know if she ended up as a villain or as a hero. It leaves the audience in a state of nervous applause, having just enjoyed something they're not sure if they should have. Having goals and working toward them is a fine enough thing for a hero, but stair-stepping off of your friends' backs? Shirking off of a large part of your identity? These are weird win some, lose the rest ways of forcing your protagonist into the dress we're going to pretend wasn't tailor-made for someone else. Because the dress she absolutely has to fit into at the end is the Cruella de Vil suit, despite the fact that the character they showed us in the movie simply should not have been left that black and white. Now for the spoilerific portion, so stop here if you haven't seen it, go enjoy, and then come right back. Of course, we first have to start off with an explanation for the iconic hair. She was born with it. It makes a pretty clear statement of split personalities, and they lean into it. Not that I have a problem with that, because I think they play it up in a fun way. As a little girl, Estella is encouraged to hide her hair, even though she doesn't. She's also encouraged to hide an implied alter ego, Cruella, which she does, at least for a little while. The expression of her hair becomes a big part of her identity. There's even this sweet moment when she first meets Jasper and Horace as kids, and Jasper says he likes her hair. She begins dyeing it when she adopts the thieving persona, and eventually returns to the black and white once she leans into the designer she wants to be. But before she can be that, she plays around in the doppelganger phase, working as the disguise designer for their pickpocket business. Because we're here not just for a breakdown of the movie, but for a Maiden's Method review, I will back up slightly. The obvious abandonment that Estella suffers is the death of her mother on the cliff. I say obvious because there's a twist, and we'll come back to it. The feminine threat is also not immediately obvious, but the movie doesn't take very long at all to introduce the Baroness. However, There's a very, shall we say, methodical touch to the guilt that Estella feels over the death of her mother. She's teased as a bit of her own feminine threat. Still, this all leads her right on through to a hidden away stage driven by her loss, her desire to be accepted, and her search for identity. All classic motivations to push someone from the blackening phase into the whitening phase. One manufactured companion option that we observe is her desire to talk to her mother. Her mother's memory exists as a force that pushes her to be better. Along with her other companions, though they're not as manufactured, she gets the push she needs to enter into the fashion world, thereby becoming a teensy bit more of the identity she craves, but has had to hide. Color-wise, the movie stays very white. Estella starts cleaning a white-ish bathroom in a beige uniform that everyone is wearing. Like I said before, the black and white are just all throughout the movie. Obviously, that has nothing to do with the Maiden's method, except that the color changes do tend to happen at very archetypally appropriate moments. When she moves into the job she's really wanted with the Baroness, there's a dramatic entrance into this wholly black and white world. Even at one of the Baroness's balls, there is a rule about no color. A rule that one guest, quote, breaks, even when a pen inside a white purse leaks, giving it a splash of blue. This guest just happens to be Anita, which, again, was pointless and could have been anyone. Considering the feminine threat categories, my estimation is that the Baroness is a snow queen. It's always fun to pick apart the villain and find out what kind of threat she is. And this character tossed me around a bit. She's hag-like in that she's completely feeding off of her employees, stealing their ideas, treating them poorly, working them to the bone, firing them on a whim. Any of these could be played with in the hag phase. It's also hard to characterize her dogs as manufactured companions because she doesn't really seem to care about them all that much. At least not until she, a classic narcissist, discovers that they have been stolen by her nemesis. And yet, identifying the feminine threat is not just about looking at what she does and how she treats people. It's done by identifying her motive. The hag manifests as someone who feeds on others because her goal is to stay alive at all costs. A snow queen might feed on others, but only if it serves to keep them in the role in which she has cast them, because the main motivation for a snow queen is to preserve her world. Remember, her world is fake, so if it ends, she ends. I might as well remind you that the dragon's motivation is, if I can't have it, no one can. A dragon can hit hard when a woman with the inklings of a snow queen cannot preserve the world that she has created. Let's just say that the ice melted when the fire came. A dragon would burn the world without hesitation if it meant that her one enemy went down in the flames. She would gladly kill herself, as long as the act had appropriate collateral damage. And while the Baroness certainly dips her toe in these tendencies, she's simply not there. But Cruella soon will be. The first ball, where Estella allows Cruella to make an appearance, she's shrouded in a white cloak with a black mask. For her reveal, she drops a match and the cloak goes up in flame to reveal a stunning red dress, one of the Baroness's own creations, which Cruella claims to have improved. This, obviously, is a deep dig at the woman whose introduction scene has her reading a review of herself, reminding her staff that perfection is the standard. The very party where Cruella is making this spectacle is one where color is not allowed, and here's Cruella in a bold red to overshadow her. This brings me to the hilarious MacGuffin that was the necklace. It's so Maiden's method it hurts, but they don't know that, and that's what's so crazy about it, because really it serves no purpose. And yet they clearly needed some sort of device to push certain elements of the story around, and they ended up with something hilariously archetypal. The quest for the red stone isn't new, y'all. But as with many archetypes, people incorporate them and don't know why. So the actual point of the necklace is pretty weak. And did anyone else make a search for a red necklace / Stardust connection because of the actor who played Septimus? No? Just me? Oh, okay, fine. One of the Baroness's Dalmatians swallows the necklace which requires Cruella to steal the dog. Again, the dogs are pointless. All the dogs are pointless. They are clearly trying really hard to make sure you know she really doesn't hate dogs. Because that's the part of Cruella de Vil that makes her utterly despicable and wholly irredeemable. So it had to be like the first card on the board in the writer's room that just said, she doesn't really hate dogs. And then every plot point they formulated afterward was in service to that premise. Going back to my assertion that you're either writing a villain or you're not, they also don't clearly delineate whether she was born mad and wants to lean into it, or if she was always just a bit eccentric and now that becomes an excuse for her trauma-induced mayhem. Again, just choose one. If she's just crazy, let's watch the crazy overtake her. If we're meant to sympathize with a victim of circumstance, even if she leans into it for the majority of the movie, she eventually has to realize that it's wrong. At this point of the movie, we're being led to believe they'll give us option number 1. As if to say, this is really who she is, and Estella has been the mild-mannered alter ego for too long. But in her quest for revenge, Estella snaps completely. She starts treating her friends poorly, and she's determined to take the Baroness down to utter ruin. This is Cruella's foray into that dragon phase we were talking about earlier. The Baroness is still in Snow Queen territory. She consistently takes credit for other people's work, making toasts like, "Here's to me." She tells Estella, "You can't care. Everyone else is an obstacle." Even to the point where she throws a chair and tells the servant that she hit, "You were in the way." We can appreciate a maiden who challenges the Snow Queen's realm. As Cruella keeps showing up in flashy displays and daring tableaus, the Baroness's world begins to melt. But remember, if she's not just succumbing to an alter ego, we're supposed to sympathize with her as a victim. Even as a victim of circumstance, the heroic figure overcomes circumstance with character. The villain allows themselves to be overtaken by circumstance in lieu of character growth. Somehow, this movie has her overcome adversity, grow successful, regress into bad habits, only to have realized tragedy push her into madness. And what, we're supposed to cheer her on because she's being herself? There's this scene at the fountain where she's in a near manic state of shock, talking aloud to her deceased adoptive mother. And to be fair, she's been confronted with a harsh reality. She has to choose whether she wants to take on the legacy that has been presented to her by birth or the opportunity that has been afforded to her through circumstance. It should not be celebrated that she opts for the former. That's the wrong choice. She literally tells us that she feels like Estella was loved into shape. What decent human being among us hasn't been? Yes, honey, I gave you an opportunity not to be a homicidal maniac. Sorry? I think any one of us has to deal with a moment when our hard work actually doesn't pay off. And it's a fair struggle. But that's not what happened. Cruella makes the comment, "I tried because I loved you." Basically turning to the conclusion that despite this, she's giving up. "Much to avenge, revenge, and destroy," she says. "But I do love you, always." There's an opportunity for some redemption that Jasper tries to encourage her toward. He steps out of a yellow-lit room through a window into a gray scene where Estella is sitting on the balcony being reflective, with ever so slight a glow of gold on the horizon. This moment and others serve as this level of encouragement she is continuously offered, as if to say, you can destroy this woman's life, but you shouldn't actually take her life. Which is kind of ironic considering the ultimate wrap-up for the movie. The ending, while very fun to watch and satisfying if you're at all invested in the movie, has the most flaws when viewed in the light of the Maiden's method. In a sea of doppelgangers, Estella is the one who emerges to claim the victory, not Cruella. See, As a rival, Estella is repulsive, an object that must be destroyed when it's no longer a stepping stone. But to the Baroness, when she's an extension of self, she's suddenly admirable again. But the other true thing about a narcissist is that any extension that is a threat to the self absolutely must go. And this is something that Estella knows, and she exploits it to draw the Baroness into a very public trap that she has set. Again, credit where credit is due. I kind of think the writers took the Cruella de Vil song and based some of the plot around it, which, in my opinion, is a little bit awesome. You can watch her spinning a web and getting people caught up in it. She's like a spider waiting for the kill. And while the explanation of her cunning plan was extremely ridiculous and laugh out loud silly, at this point in the movie, I have fully conceded to just taking whatever that is that they throw at me, so fine. There's absolutely a larger-than-life element threaded throughout the motif, and I can absolutely appreciate that with some of the decisions that they made. But my beef with the movie is, and always will be, a lack of consistency with the character growth. Because despite the fact that Estella is the one who won the day, whose actions were rewardable ones, who showed herself to be fully capable of greatness despite the suppression of Cruella as an alter ego, that's the person that gets killed off at the end? And the reason I called that red jewel necklace a MacGuffin was because it too gets buried with her at the end. Not so symbolically killing off Estella as the side that is the offspring of her adopted mother, deliberately ceasing the line that she had a hand in creating, thereby allowing Cruella, the offspring of the Baroness, to persist as the champion character. What? I'm feeling a little bit like Horace at the end. I think I'd be crying too if the part that I actually liked of my friend was being laid in the ground while the maniacal alter ego that she has is now standing beside me and has free rein to treat me like crap still, I guess. Even Jasper says, "She's not actually dead, mate." But is that true? The final line of the movie has Jasper asking, "What now?" And Cruella says, "I've got a few ideas." Which is kind of cool, I guess, and Maiden's methody. It's a line that I would like if I didn't think that those ideas were dragon-like mayhem and destruction. And I'll say it again. I don't know what to feel at the end of this movie. It's not the same story, nor even the origin story of Cruella de Vil as we know her in basically every other iteration of 101 Dalmatians. They make that very clear. So I'm expected to make my conclusions based on this movie alone. And that said, I don't know what they want from me. As I said to a few people before watching the movie, I would rather they just lean into the crazy. I don't want them to make me feel sympathy for Cruella de Vil. Nobody wants that. But all they really did was say, "No, she's not a puppy killer, don't worry," and then spent half of the movie coaxing her out of homicidal tendencies. They showed us an internal battle of good versus evil, only to let the evil side win. And if the line between homicidal maniac and eccentric fashion designer is a lack of focused hatred, that's not character development, that's Cruella 2, Horace and Jasper, stoke the fire. The parental guidance I'd suggest to any kid under 13 or not would simply be, I know that was a fun ride, but she's crazy, and madness doesn't actually get rewarded like that. And for a PG-13 audience, that should be obvious. So get ready for the slew of people who say that they hate this movie because they don't like the message. Hey look, fair enough. I kind of like this movie despite the message, because there is a message, and I think it's wrong. There's something in there like, be who you are no matter what. But that's prosaic nonsense. Let's get back to something like, become what you can be because of all that you have been. And the movie doesn't seem to want to admit that that's precisely the story that they told. But if they didn't have this, hell-bent scheme to force the character into the Cruella mask, the story could have followed its natural trajectory to let Estella be the part of her character that lived, standing at the gravesite of Cruella de Vil, wearing the necklace and honoring her true mother. In conclusion, though, I am dying to watch it again. It was fun and visually stunning. The cocky mayhem is enjoyable if you're along for the ride, and I will recommend it to others, particularly because I think everyone should get their own take on it. There's enough substance for people to like and dislike a wide variety of elements. So I'll simply leave you with this. To see her is to take a sudden chill. Look out for Cruella de Vil.